So, ladies, gentlemen and MBs, as you can see from the title of this video and my clothes, this is another asexual video. And, well, there is simply no avoiding it. Today we are going to be talking about SE... in my Christian Minecraft server! Hi, rhetorical device to voice questions and opposing viewpoints that is also being played by me because it's easier than trying to find a second person. You didn't even bother to take the nail polish off. Well, it looks nice. I mean, you're not wrong. Now, I understand that talking about sex is something that a lot of people may take issue with. Some people are very sensitive about this particular topic, and I want to make it clear that when I'm talking about sex, I'm going to be doing it in a completely non-judgmental way. This is a sex-positive video, and that means that I respect your bodily autonomy to have as much or as little sex as you want in whatever ways that you want, as long as everyone involved is a consenting adult. For those who are more uncomfortable with these discussions, I want to be clear that I will not be explicitly describing any sex acts, because that would honestly be uncomfortable for me too. But I also want to make it clear that when I say sex, I am not just referring to penetration. That's just one part of sex, and if you think that's all there is to it, then honestly, you're bad at sex. You can take my word for that, because I've never had it. Okay, is that all? Well, there'll also be mentions of aphobia, other queerphobia, I will get into the Kink at Pride discourse, and there is a very fleeting mention of sexual assault, so just be aware of all that. Right, so can we get on with it then? Almost. Ugh. First of all, I've worn this outfit in like 3 whole asexual videos now, and I think it's about time for a change. Alright, that'll do. You look like Adamant and the Joker ran into each other really fast. So, what's the first thing you want to know? How can asexuals even have sex? I mean, your whole thing is that you aren't sexual, so how on earth can anyone have sex and still be asexual? Isn't that a contradiction in terms? Now, I want to make one thing abundantly clear here. I absolutely cannot and do not intend to speak for all asexuals, even though I am their king. Asexuality is a wide umbrella term that applies to a lot of different experiences of people of all genders, races, body types, physical ability, and there isn't really any one correct way to encompass the entirety of it, particularly from my very privileged position as... But this is a question and an assumption that I do see a lot. People take asexual to mean someone who doesn't want to or can't have sex. I see this particularly from well-meaning people in their attempts to be inclusive, but it shows a lack of understanding of what asexuals actually experience. Our relationship to sex is more complicated than just, sure, sex is great, but have you ever been properly hydrated? How so? Well, asexuals can have sex, and plenty of them do. How is that asexual? Seems like any time that I discuss this, I keep having to go back to this very basic thing, but asexual just means that you don't experience sexual attraction. This is just one of the kinds of attraction that people can feel. When you look at a person and think, whoa, I would, I think. I don't know, I don't have it. Yeah, I remember this, and there's romantic attraction, right? Right, the other one I don't have. I guess it's like when you look at someone and get butterflies in the tummy. I don't know, I only have cockroaches in mine. But there's also a couple of types of attraction I haven't really talked about on this channel before. There's aesthetic attraction, which is basically when you are attracted to the way someone looks, but don't have any sexual connotations behind that. So when I look at John Cameron Mitchell, Gillian Anderson, and Mads Mikkelsen... Hey, focus. I'm sorry, I got distracted. But I can enjoy looking at people who I find aesthetically attractive and appreciate and enjoy how beautiful they are, and then... that's it. I move on with my day. There is also sensual attraction, which is attraction to touch and physical sensation with people. Now, I know this sounds like it might be somewhat inherently sexual, but it isn't. It can be any kind of touching that you are attracted to, so hand-holding, hugging, kissing, stuff like that. All kinds of touch that can make people feel good and attracted to others, but don't necessarily tie into sex. Different people will have different connections to each of these types of attraction, and this is true for asexuals and allosexuals. Asexuals just talk about it and work to figure these ideas out of themselves more. All these different layers of attraction can play into whether or not people want to have sex with someone. If you're romantically attracted to someone but not sexually, you might still want to have sex with them as a way of expressing that attraction. But I still don't get how that can work without the sexual attraction. You don't need sexual attraction to have sex. Sex is just an activity that people do, and it doesn't rely on being attracted to someone to do it. I mean, do you think that all sex workers are just madly attracted to their clients, or that porn stars are actually always into each other?
But porn stars and sex workers aren't asexuals.
Some are. Because again, plenty of asexuals have sex and it isn't at odds with the identity.
But how do they do it?
I said at the start, no explicit descriptions, remember?
What I mean is, if they don't have attraction, then how do they get in the mood?
How many times will I have to explain this? Libido and attraction are not the same thing. Any number of things outside of your attraction can have an effect on your arousal. It can be incited by touch, sound, sometimes just for no reason at all, or with the help of chemicals.
Chemsex.
Arousal is brought about without attraction all the time, and, well, if you were consenting, then it can be a short step from arousal to sex.
I'm still confused here.
Big shock.
I mean, you keep talking about how asexuals can have sex, but I thought asexuals all hated sex. I've seen the memes you all share, the posts that you make. From what I can tell, thinking that sex is gross and weird is a prerequisite to your whole thing. That and liking purple too much. I don't like purple that much. Just because I have a purple jacket, shirt, towel, notebook, second smaller towel, cat brush, other notebook, laptop and mouse, suitcase, washcloths, duster, crockery set, cutlery set, third notebook, and miniature wheelie bin. Alright.
But I get it. I see how looking at a lot of asexual interactions online, you would get the impression that we all hate sex. It does seem to be our favourite joke. Plus, allos who are trying to be inclusive of us will say that you shouldn't talk about it so much because it will make us all uncomfortable. It's very easy for people looking from the outside to get that impression that this one view on sex comes programmed into all aces. But if you look into it for even a little bit, you very quickly realise that it isn't like that at all, and the attitudes towards sex are actually wide and varied.
Care to elaborate? Preferably with some defined categories that can make it easy for someone to understand?
Sure. So, generally, attitudes towards sex can be broken down into 3 categories. These are sex favourable, sex indifferent, and sex repulsed. Now, you can probably get what each of these means just from the names, but I'll get into it, obviously, because that's just kind of what we do here. So, let's start with sex favourable. Very basically, this is people who are okay with sex. They are comfortable with engaging in sexual acts and are likely to seek out a sexual relationship. They may enjoy the physical experience of it, they may do it for the sake of an allosexual partner, they may do it because it's entirely their own business and we don't need to speculate on why. If we accept what I've already said, that there doesn't need to be a connection between sexual attraction and actually having sex, then sex-favourable asexuality should be pretty easy to grasp.
Okay, I think I get that. So the other 2 categories?
Next we have sex indifferent. This is the category for people who have no particular strong feelings about sex one way or the other. They aren't inclined towards it, but it doesn't put them off either. This is probably the one that I would describe myself as. Sex isn't a thing that I have any personal interest in doing, but I'm not upset at the idea, and I suppose if I wanted to for some reason I could, but, just not for me, really.
Also, I want to make it abundantly clear that this doesn't mean it's okay to say sexualized things about me. Just don't do it.
So I'm guessing that sex repulsed is people that don't like it. Well, that's the simplified version, yeah. Sex repulsed people, or sex averse people, do not like sex. This can vary from just not wanting it for themselves, but being fine with the concept in things like porn and movies, to the very thought of it at all making someone's skin crawl. For some people, it's just a lack of interest, similar to that of sex indifferent people. For others, it is outright disgust and genuine physical revulsion.
That sounds like it's unpleasant.
It can be, I'm sure. When you consider how sexualized the world is, if being around that stuff makes you feel uncomfortable, then yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable a lot of the time.
What makes a person like that?
Well, nothing has to. For plenty of people, it is just how they are. There are times when it is linked to trauma, but by no means should we assume that this is always the case when speaking about sex repulsion. We need to listen to people who experience this and trust them that they know themselves and their boundaries. You just need to have some basic respect for people's lived experiences,
But does this not fly a bit in the face of being sex positive? I mean, if people are so against sex, does that not stand against, say, supporting sex workers?
Well, I don't think that sex repulsed people tend to be swerfs. We need to be clear that sex repulsion and sex negativity are not the same thing. You can be personally repulsed by sex and still be supportive of other people's sexual autonomy. In fact, a part of being sex positive should be speaking out for those who are repulsed by sex, to make environments that are safe for them to exist in without fear of having to deal with it. But the correlation that some people try to put between asexuals and sex negativity is something that we'll definitely talk about later in this conversation.
Alright, so is it more asexual to not want sex?
No. There is no correct way to be ace. However you experience your attractions and choose to label yourself is equally valid to anyone else. Certain voices may seem more prevalent in the community, but there is a place for everyone.
Fair enough. So, those 3 categories sum up all asexuals' attitudes on sex.
Well, obviously it doesn't all map out so neatly in practice. These categories are all umbrella terms that encompass a wide range of experiences. There is overlap between some of the categories, and some people may move around in the way that they feel about it at any given time. For instance, demisexual people might be repulsed or indifferent, but change to favourable after they develop an emotional connection with someone. Or something I recently learned about, asexuals might start out as favourable but become indifferent or repulsed as they develop that relationship. Also, it should go without saying that not every asexual person that you speak to will have this labelled. Not everyone needs to stop and think about that aspect of themselves enough to try and categorise it if they don't want to.
Okay, that makes some sense. I'm guessing from the way these things tend to go with you that this is also information that allosexuals could use to think about themselves?
You got it. As ever, this isn't anything specifically to do with sexual attraction. It's just that some asexuals, like me, spend more time thinking about the intersections and differences between sexual attraction and sexual action. Partly out of curiosity and to understand ourselves better, partly because I guess it sometimes feels like we have to justify our existence, especially sex-positive asexuals, ace-kinksters, ace-sex workers. By not understanding the difference between them, people can think that being okay with sex somehow invalidates an asexual identity, and it doesn't.
Wait, I'm sorry, did you say asexual kinksters?
Yeah, why?
Asexuals can be into kink? I mean, I can just about wrap my head around this idea of asexuals having sex, but, I mean, kink is a step beyond, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just sex, is it? It's fetish play. That weird stuff with the zip ties and things.
Well, that's being a bit judgy. Also, zip ties I think are not recommended. They cut off the circulation too much. It's dangerous. Just use a braided rope.
I wasn't looking for tips.
Point is, yes, kink is about fetish, but fetish is not inherently about sex.
Okay, now I know you're wrong. The whole point of kink is that it's sexual, isn't it? I mean, why else would they do it if they weren't actually having sex?
Okay, so it would probably help if we define exactly what kink means. Although bear in mind that this is also stuff I have never done, I just looked it up on the internet a little.
Hope you deleted your browser history.
No, because it isn't anything to be ashamed of. A kink is a non-conventional arousal. This can be any number of things. It might be attraction to a certain part of the body, it might be to a certain power dynamic, it might be to a physical experience. It isn't all whips and handcuffs.
Arousal, so it is sexual.
There is undoubtedly a sexual element to a lot of it, and plenty of people do use it to enhance their sex lives, but the actual physical experience of being aroused by getting tied up, for example, does not always exist as a prelude to sex. It might just be that the feeling of nylon rope around your wrists and ankles does it for you on its own.
Yeah, but if you go into a situation where you're volunteering to get tied onto a bed but don't want to get sex out of it, then what if the person who has tied you up does?
Well, if they were to take advantage of someone in that situation, then that would be assault, and they would be a bad kink partner. At the centre of a kink dynamic like that is trust. You make your boundaries clear and it is on the other person to respect them, and if at any point they are crossed or you are uncomfortable, then safe words come into play to prevent it going any further. In an ideal scenario, it is a safe environment for you to explore what precisely you are and are not comfortable with, where there's no fear of judgment or reprisals.
I'm sorry, but I just don't feel like I trust it.
I think a lot of that comes down to how it is often portrayed in the media.
Tools! Duct tape, zip ties, and gloves! I have to have my tools!
Well, why do you have a bunch of, weird tools in a hidden compartment in your car?
Fetish shit! I like to bind, I like to be bound!
TV shows and movies like to make it out to be this big, naughty taboo. This thing that only weirdos are into, or as a sign that the people doing it are emotionally damaged and acting out.
Because I'm 50 shades of fucked up.
And it's a really unfair brush to paint a whole community of people who are just consensually exploring their own desires with. There's nothing damaged or damaging about kink, unless it's being done badly.
And you say there are asexuals who are into that?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Since sexual attraction and arousal
are separate, you keep saying,
then you don't need to have attraction to the person you are participating in kink with. To keep using roleplay as the example, even though there are many other forms, you can meet up with people on message boards to tie you up the first time you meet them.
Seems unsafe.
Not my decision to judge, just be careful. But if you're just going to this person's place because you like the experience of being tied up, then you don't need to be attracted to them to enjoy that experience. So it makes sense that asexuals can enjoy participating in kink, even if they are sex indifferent or sex repulsed. Though I'll admit a sex repulsed person being into it seems unlikely, but you never know because that sort of thing is generally private.
As it should be.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if people want to talk about it, they shouldn't have to feel ashamed of it.
What? Do you think they should be proud of it?
I can see where this is going.
I mean, think of all the people who might see it.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there and get to the point. You want to talk about kink at Pride? Then let's talk about kink at Pride. Please go right ahead and tell me exactly what your issues are with kink at Pride. I am dying to know exactly what problem you have with it.
Well, Pride's a family event, isn't it? There's kids there. Do you think that it's alright for them to see this stuff?
Pride was not meant to be a family event.
It was always adult, with a clear understanding that some of the people there would be flaunting a very specific type of sexuality. It's only in more recent years, as corporations realise that marketing things as queer-friendly made them more money, that we've started to see Pride turned into a socially acceptable party event where people bring their kids. But kids are there now, whether they were meant to be from the beginning or not. And is it not irresponsible to expose them to that kind of sexuality? I mean, think of the trauma that could cause them.
It's not like people are having sex in the street at Pride. It's just some people in the parade wearing leather harnesses. I don't see what harm it does.
But they're kids and they're being exposed to this sexual stuff.
Kids are exposed to sexual stuff all the damn time. Or have you just never seen any adverts? Consistently, as part of the heteronormative and allonormative world that we live in, we are bombarded with sexual imagery from all corners. It's on TV, it's in music,
I told you long ago on the road, I got what they waiting for.
you can see women lying provocatively in bikinis on bus stop ads. So tell me why all of that stuff is fine for a kid to be around but the leather daddy isn't. Well, or recently, when we had the Euro finals and a guy was seen with a flare up his arse in the middle of the crowds. I don't remember seeing a weeks-long Twitter discourse over that, which I would say is far worse than the guy with the puppy play outfit on. I understand the concern around kids seeing potentially harmful stuff related to sex. There is genuinely the possibility of them being traumatised if they see something that makes them uncomfortable. But whenever I hear this ridiculous discourse every damn year, it always just sounds like people only want to protect their kids from sexual imagery if it isn't straight. So you admit that seeing that kind of sexual imagery can be harmful? Possibly, but I also don't think that we should just completely shield kids from knowing what sexuality is. I mean, you don't have to explain the actual ins and outs.
Ugh.
But it probably won't hurt them to know that people have sex and that some people just like to do it in different ways. And if you don't want your kids seeing that, then don't take them to the Pride Parade, honestly. Okay, but we're a little off track. This video is meant to be about asexuals.
Well, do you have a question about asexuals that ties into it?
Well, I mean, isn't it inconsiderate to asexuals to let all that sex just be floating around?
I'm sorry, but you have got to stop assuming that all asexuals are sex repulsed, or that sex repulsed people have a problem with others being proud of their sexuality. I see this tied into the discourse every time it comes up. People say that we shouldn't allow kink at Pride because now the aces are here, and they don't like it. It is bullshit every time. I hate it for some very specific reasons. First of all, it is never the aces who are saying this. It is always allos speaking over us and infantilizing the community by trying to put us in the same position as the imagined traumatized kids that others are using for their arguments. Never once accepting that we might be capable of making our own decisions and forming our own opinions on the subject. Second, they try to make it out as though us being at Pride is new, playing into the idea that asexuality is a new thing, an internet orientation as so many call it. But we have always been here, and we have always been at Pride. I haven't been able to find if there were any aces at Stonewall necessarily, but since the beginnings of the movement in the early 70s, asexual people have been involved and been a part of the community, even if we weren't always talked about or known. It's disrespectful to ace elders to suggest that we are only just arriving now, and that we would have a problem with a movement they helped to build. And thirdly,
The thing that concerns me the most when I hear this being said, the allos who say it are trying to turn people against asexuals. They know that pride is a very sex-positive thing, and they want to paint us as sex-negative, to pretend like we're the ones who have a problem with this stuff, so that the rest of the queer community will turn on us. It's maybe not as organised as something like the targeted attacks on trans people, but there is a deliberate hostility to it that is trying to split the community apart so that we are easier to silence. Do not fall for it.
Wow, you went off on one.
Yeah, because I don't like my community being used as a tool of someone else's culture war. We didn't sign up for any war. Except the inevitable overthrow of Denmark.
It will be mine. Oh yes, it will be mine.
Okay. But I still think if Pride is going to be this inclusive and fun event, Pride is not just a fun event, it is a fucking protest. And it was built by Kinksters. They have been here since Stonewall, from the very beginning. They went out there when the whole world was against them and marched and protested and fought for queer people's right to exist. We do not get to just drive them away from what they created over a new, invented moral panic, which, by the way, was almost exclusively pushed by far-right hate groups who want us all dead. There is no room for this discourse, and no one should give it any credence. I am done with that bullshit. Okay, I think that's probably enough for now. Let's wrap this up, shall we? The relationship between asexuality and sex is more complicated than people tend to make it out to be. We are often portrayed as entirely sexless. Some of this is of our own making, some of it is what others have projected onto us, but there are so many different ways that someone can feel about sex, and all of them apply across the whole of the ace community. There are people who are trying particularly hard to make our community look like we are sex negative, and using us as part of arguments to harm the queer community, and we have to allow more room for acceptance of sex-positive aces into the discussion if we want to fight against the false narrative that is being pushed about us. For all the aspects, this is the bit where I do my best to validate you. No matter how you experience your relationship to sex, you are ace enough. You can be ace and have a lot of sex, or you can be ace and have no sex at all. There isn't a way for you to do it wrong. If you still haven't figured out how you feel about it, then take as long as you need. It is your body and your journey, and no one can tell you how you are allowed to feel about it. Okay, so is that the end of the video? Yeah, just about. I need to do the credits, and I've got a quick thing I want to announce. Do you need me around for that? No, I think your usefulness as a gimmick is worn out for now. Okay, so should I just leave, or...? Nah, I just won't film any more lines for you. So first off, the announcement. If you look to the side of this video, you will see that there is a link to a fundraiser. This is a feature that YouTube added fairly recently, and I figured that since I have the ability, that I would be misusing my platform a little if I didn't try to actively help queer causes instead of just talking about them. So we are going to be raising money for the LGBTQ Freedom Fund. This is a bail fund that works to get low-income queer people out of incarceration across North America. Queer people are 3 times more likely to be jailed, and due to difficult home situations and discriminatory job hiring practices, many can't afford to bail themselves out of a situation where they are incredibly likely to face abuse. So having a bail fund like this can do so much good to help so many people in need. I am going to conservatively set the goal at $1,000 and throw in some starting seed money myself, but I would love for you all to surprise me and blow right past that. I should probably have also said that my plan is just to run this until the 31st of August 2021, so if you're here after that, that's why it's not there anymore. The way this YouTube giving thing works is that 100% of the money raised goes directly to the charity. So please, give generously if you can. Thank you so much.
Come on. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
Oh my god, the duplicate
this cat exists in 2 spaces at once.
Wow.
Oh no, it's a time paradox, Frank. You don't seem bothered, do you?
You're not happy about this, are you? Okay, Daniel.
Okay.
Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex.
I would just like to thank my patrons for indulging me in making conversations with myself about sex, with an extra special thanks to A Socialist Hobgoblin, Chris Harper, Dan Brown, William Gray, Bags, and Finn Flaherty. If you'd like to support me, then please head to patreon.com/DavidJBradley or click the link at the end. If not, then you can still help out a great deal by liking, commenting, subscribing, clicking one of the videos that will appear at the end, or, best of all, giving to the LGBTQ Freedom Fund. This is what I've been wearing to film all day, because it's been so warm. but now because there'll be shots where you might see my legs, I need to wear trousers. So